This is the second of two tutorials dealing with expressions, facial expressions, and how it's possible to keep in contact with both characters, even though one character maybe remains a little bit silent, just receiving the information. We can't just keep on the person delivering the information. We need to see how the tennis match of a conversation of serve and return is affecting both participants. And this is a good example. We've just got Helen and Tim together chatting. Helen is doing most of the talking and Tim is in a listening mode, but we need to keep him in the loop. Let's have a go at it. Okay, as always, let's have a look at the two shots. Here is Helen's shot.
Is that the best excuse you could come up with to borrow some eggs? You'll have to do better than that, Tim.
I wanted to see how you were.
And Tim's reaction.
Is that the best excuse you could come up with? Borrowing some eggs? You'll have to do better than that, Tim.
I wanted to see how you were, especially after reading the paper.
Okay, let's have a go at putting them together. I'm going to put Helen's shot down first. So there's the beginning of her shot. I mark the end, and on it goes onto the timeline. Now, as always, I'm going to cut to Tim for his dialogue, which is towards the end of the shot.
You'll have
here.
to do better than that, Tim.
I wanted...
And I'll put it roughly at his timing that he gave us as a feed-in line when we recorded Helen's shot. So let's now pick up Tim's shot. I wanted to hear...
I wanted to see how...
I'll go from his look down to maintain what eye contact I can, and that to the end of the shot there, and plonk it on. Okay, let's see that join.
You'll have to do better than that, Tim.
I wanted to see how you were, especially after reading the paper.
I'm not going to be able to maintain... Helen looks down quite quickly.
Better than that, Tim.
I wanted to see how...
I think we could have Tim in silence a little bit longer before he answers. Here we go.
Better than that, Tim.
I wanted to see...
Better than that, Tim.
I wanted to see...
Yeah, not so bad. I feel I want to see Tim a little bit earlier as well. Let's see if we can find a point that I can glance to Tim. What reaction does he give us, and when does he give it to us?
Is that the best excuse you could come up with? Borrowing some eggs? You'll have to do better.
Yeah, so he's embarrassed about his excuse. So let's see if we can put that in. So there's that little nudge there. So let's put it at the same point as Helen's
Best excuse you could come up with.
So I'm going to go to him there.
Borrow some eggs.
Borrow some eggs. Let's guess we'll go to there. Don't want to take the sound, just Tim's reaction, and plonk that in. Let's have a look.
Is that the best excuse you could come up with to borrow some eggs?
Just want to push it a tiny bit later. 1, 2. Have another look.
Excuse you could come up with to borrow some eggs. Excuse you could come up with to borrow some eggs. You'll have to do better than that.
Now, I'm going to want to stay on Tim a little bit longer till he fully puts his head down. I know we're going to be late to Helen's speech, but I think this looks better.
You'll have to do better than that, Tim.
Yes, it doesn't matter. We're a fraction late back to her. Now, is he reacting at the right
Excuse
time?
you could come up with to borrow some eggs.
Yeah, it's not bad. He could react a fraction quicker. So I'm going to take the front of his shot off and replace it with a tiny bit more of Helen. So 1, 2. Try that.
Excuse you could come up with to borrow some eggs. You'll have to do better than that, Tim.
That's good. Now, how does that extra shot of Tim affect our cut back to him?
Is that the best excuse you could come up with to borrow some eggs? You'll have to do better than that, Tim.
I wanted to see how you were.
I wouldn't mind seeing him maybe recovering from his from his very embarrassed look down. So I'm wondering whether he should look back up again.
You'll have to do better than that, Tim.
I wanted to see how...
No, it's going to be too loose. Maybe right just at the end of the look. I'd have to borrow some sound from the outgoing or put some Atmos in. Does this look any better? Here we go.
You'll have to do better than that, Tim.
I wanted to see how you were.
Yes, that's not bad. I quite like the idea of him looking up again, because that's after all where we left him. So I'm going to come off Helen a fraction earlier. That's 4 frames earlier. Let's see what difference that's made. Here we go again.
Up with to borrow some eggs. You'll have to do better than that, Tim.
I wanted to see how you were.
Yes, improving all the time. I'm going to go a bit further. Once Helen's moved away from him, so that's another 3 frames back. 3 frames less of Helen, 3 frames more of Tim. Here we go again.
You'll have to do better than that, Tim.
I wanted to see how you were, especially after reading the paper.
I think that's pretty good. Right, let's have a look at the whole thing, full frame.
Is that the best excuse you could come up with to borrow some eggs? You'll have to do better than that, Tim.
I wanted to see how you were, especially after reading the paper.
I know that's a fragment of a scene, and your cuts may differ when the whole scene is in and the balance between Helen's shots and Tim's shots are completely worked out over the whole of the 2-minute scene, let's say. But I don't think that's a bad example. That cutaway of Tim looking down sheepishly certainly was well worth putting in, and it shows exactly the effect on him of Helen's cutting remark of "you'll have to do better than that." And then the cut back to him where he comes up from looking down is also a good one. So the whole of his emotional ride through the conversation is there, even though he only adds a remark right at the end. As always, good and bad versions are there for download, and indeed the shots that make up the scene. So have a go at it.